Hello and welcome to A Cat in the Garden. I know we have been prepping a lot for a freeze because typically here in Central Texas, a first frost happens around Thanksgiving and we still haven't had one, but that is changing next week, Sunday night into Monday. We're expected to have a moderate freeze. Last I checked, the prediction was 27 degrees overnight. It's supposed to last for quite a few days. I think most of the weekdays next week. Just in the day, it's gonna get up to the 50s or 40s, but at night, unfortunately, down to 27. Earlier, I've been checking every day. Earlier, it said 25, and I was really freaking out. I would prefer a light freeze, but that kind of caps out at 29 and then it moves into a moderate freeze situation. And if it was a light freeze, I'd be less concerned about some of my crops, but with a moderate freeze, I do think I'm going to potentially lose a bit more. I'm obviously going to lose what's left of my peppers, basil, tomatoes, things like that, but I do have some herbs that can tolerate a light freeze, and I don't think they can quite tolerate a moderate, such as my lemongrass. And I do have some solutions. I have some frost cloths I can use. I was going to spend today actually planting more seeds out in the garden, but with this cold spell coming, I don't think that's the best idea. Just because I have more success direct sowing, I'd rather just wait until this passes, because it'll pass and then we'll get some more weather for a while and then we'll get another freeze. But I am astonished that we haven't gotten a freeze thus far. Really, this is about a month and a half late to get our first real freeze. We had some threatened frost. It got down to about 34, but it wasn't really a legitimate freeze. Alrighty, Nutmeg. So we're gonna get to work today, just doing some overall prep, some harvesting of some things that I want to get cleared before the freeze, and hopefully protecting some of the crops that I'm a little bit worried about. But most of my winter veggies will be fine. It's just things like the lemongrass, like my peas. They can tolerate a light to maybe moderate freeze, but I don't really want to chance it. Now, it is a little bit before that is supposed to happen, so I'm not going to quite do everything today, but I will lay out the plan for the things that I'm not totally addressing right now and just let you know what I'm going to do leading up to that freeze, because I want to not rush Sunday right before the freeze and just have to do everything at once. So I figured I would take this slightly warmer afternoon and get those things done ahead of time, just so that I'm not panicking too much last minute. Back behind me here is probably one of the best places to start, because all of this is going to be absolutely toast. I have this Thai basil, which is already suffering a little bit. I have a couple of tomato plants still. I have tomato and basil in the bed right next to it. So this is all going to be gone. So I like to harvest the tomatoes if I can. I might just leave the basil here because it is still flowering and I do still have bees frequenting the yard, so I'll just let this die off before I pull it up. But the tomatoes, probably I'll just chop them down now, try to get this trellis that's already falling apart behind me out of here, and we'll just go from there. There's not too many tomatoes back here, but there are some, because it has been miraculously still producing throughout this winter. They are mostly green, but they should ripen up inside, and if they don't, they'll just go bad and I'll toss them anyway. But this at least is a chance. With your tomatoes, you just want them to be shiny on the outside versus opaque, and they have the best chance of success. This one is kind of borderline shiny versus opaque. Typically it's a bit easier to tell, but I'm just gonna bring them inside no matter what, and we'll see what happens. I just lay them out on the counter until they are ready to eat. I think there's one more over here. Yep, and that should be it for the tomatoes. So that's what I've got, and I'll just be tearing this down now. There's some string that I have to take care of in order to bring this down. There might also be some bugs living in it, which is fine, I guess. Okay, apart pretty easily. Until next year, right, Saffron? I don't think she quite got in frame, but she's got the zoomies right now. This is the cat's first time outside all day, so they're going a little crazy. And one more stake to untie here. Normally I like to leave the tomatoes and peppers and things up until freeze, but then I've noticed I just get really sad the next morning when I come out and everything's dead. So I'm gonna try to mitigate that by chopping it all off now and seeing if that helps me feel any better. It is still sad, but these plants, I feel like they've extended their lives and they're just not looking as good as they could be at this point. So they'll just make for some good compost. Probably chop them up into a few different pieces. Make it easier. This is really going to change the landscape of the yard, I think. Because since March, I've had these tomatoes. It's now January. That is 10 months, which is quite a long time. But all tomatoes must come to an end at some point, I guess. Oh, there's another tie down here. It's been so long, I didn't quite realize how much we've done with these plants. This stake will get reused next year. That's a pretty sturdy one. I'll just chop it off until it's a stub basically at the bottom and then let the freeze get it all the way. The bugs and organisms under the surface will have fun with the roots, and then that'll be it. Wow. It's all gone. So this is the final result. I've just left the basil in place and pretty much little stumps for the tomatoes. That one is really a stump there. And this is what I have to compost. So I'll probably break it down with a shovel later, but I can go ahead and add it to the compost pile and we can move on to something else. The next task would be these peppers right behind me. These are the last peppers out in my garden and I kept them because I wasn't quite sure if a freeze was going to happen. It didn't, but unfortunately there just hasn't been enough light or heat for them to produce anything since I took out all the other peppers. I want to say that was late November. So I don't even think it's worth keeping them around. I did just plant some leeks in here the other day. Had I known a freeze was coming, I might not have planted little baby leeks in there, but hey, they can survive a pretty deep freeze, so I'm not too worried about them, but I still would like to get these peppers out just in case I do feel like covering the leeks. These stakes are really a hassle. I can't really get my frost cloth over them. I just want to get them out of here and I want to get these peppers trimmed down to just a stump like the tomatoes. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'll come back later and clean up all of these stakes that are out here. Hi, Safi. Hello. Hi. Oh, she's just out of frame, but she is saying hello. So I'll come back later, clean up all these stakes. I have a certain area where I put them all, but right now the main goal is to just get them out of these beds, like I said, in case I do feel like covering up these leeks. This is a smaller raised bed, so it is a lot easier to cover than some of my larger ones. There are some, especially the ones with the trellises in the middle of the garden, that I just can't cover at all. And there's a little grub. You're going away. Goodbye. Got two more. these strings off. And then I'll get the stakes out and get the peppers composted pretty much. So these are ready to go. My husband basically just took some wood from Lowe's or Home Depot and turned it into these really awesome pepper stakes. They're very sturdy because I do use those like little garden stakes, but they don't hold up quite as well, especially when the peppers get really big for the end of the summer. So these have been an absolute game changer for the garden. Now, unfortunately, it's time. I gotta come collect all these tags and string too. I'll just make a little pile. And then when I'm done, I'll collect it all, put it all away, and that'll be the end of that. Oh, they're just starting to get new growth too. That is very unfortunate, but sometimes you just gotta know when to cut your losses. That's dead. Whatever that was. I also have a volunteer tomato in here, but it never did anything, so that's also gonna go. Oh wow, this bed just looks empty now. Just purely empty. Saffron's got the zoomies fully. Here we go, one more cleared out bed. These will be added to the compost pile, which is looking extra full right now just because I haven't broken down all of these branches, but a shovel does it pretty quickly and easily, so we'll get that level soon. So these are my peas, pretty tough to cover with this trellis, but I do sometimes when we get that one deep freeze, usually in January, I wrap blankets around to cover it. It doesn't fully protect, you know, but it does something. So I think I will do that again. Like I said, they can tolerate a light freeze, but this freeze is leaning more on the moderate side based off of the weather predictions. And I am just finally starting to actually get peas and beautiful flowers. I've been waiting quite a while. I feel like a few months for these to grow out. I have these. Yes, hello, Fran. And I also have some smaller ones over here. These might be a little bit easier to cover just because they're still so low to the ground. I believe I planted them a month later, and there is a lot of shade in this bed compared to the other one, just from this basil and the large fennel and that lemongrass right there. So these might be a little bit easier to cover. They're also lower to the ground, so they might not get too much damage in terms of like the risk, but these back here I am much more worried about. So I will be Sunday, because that's going to be the last day before the freeze, I'll be wrapping these up. So that's not something I'm going to do now, because I'll let them enjoy the warm weather while we have it. And another thing I will unfortunately have to say goodbye to is my eggplant. And I just, oh, this plant is so sentimental because it's the first eggplant I ever grew. It's obviously looking a little bit gangly right now, and some leaves fell off when I had to cover it because we did get a threat of a frost. So it's not looking its best, and I think it's probably better to just start over next year. As nice as it would be to start off with an already established plant, I just don't trust that I'd be able to overwinter it at this point. So I think we're gonna have to say goodbye. I might not chop this one down just because I'm slightly delusional about saving it. So we'll see with this one. But yeah, the tomatoes and the peppers, they're gone, except for this tomato plant right here. It's just so entangled up in the trellis that I think it's gonna be very hard to chop back, and it'll be much easier when it's dead. But it does have all of these beautiful little tomatoes. Now, some of them I might save until Sunday just because they're not quite that shiny color I want them to be. But there are some fallen and throughout the plant, some ripe ones. So if we can find a few and save them now, or any that are ready, I think we'll go ahead and do that now. So it's a bit backlit, but there are a few things that I can save. I believe I just stepped on, yeah, I just stepped on one. That's what I get for letting it grow on the ground. But this cluster looks really good. I don't think I see too many clusters that are turning yellow. It's really hard for them to fully ripen outside at this point in the season, just because this is the shortest daylight point of the season right now. I think a week or two ago was the shortest day of the year. So I'll just take whole clusters that look shiny wherever I can find them and let them ripen inside. I've just got a little cardboard box set up, like those little ones you get from the garden center that hold your plants. I just put all the tomatoes on that and let them ripen up. They've been doing that really nicely for the most part, though I do need to go through them because some will go bad. It's just what happens at the end of the season. Oh, there's just so many little tomatoes that could ripen if a freeze wasn't happening, or could get bigger, and I'm going to lose all of them because it's less than a week from now. We'll see if there's any on this side. I believe there's some right here. This is what these clusters will look like. Now this is the white currant cherry tomato from Baker Creek Seeds. It's a bit smaller than most cherry tomatoes as it is. So I'm not really caring so much about size. It's just gonna be whether or not they're shiny, because that means they are mature enough to ripen inside. There's a nice sized one though. Those look like normal cherry tomatoes. This has definitely been my most prolific tomato of the 2024 season. And I guess you could say 2025, because we are in that now. There's a little rotten one. We'll get rid of that. I'm not going to bring that inside if it's already rotten. Some of the clusters are growing in between the trellis too. So I think that's mostly it. I'll do a once over before I move on to something else, but that's a decent amount of tomatoes. I'm also going to be collecting some things that I don't necessarily have to, like some of this rosemary, because I have been giving some things away just to help offload the crazy influx of things that are coming in right now. I've been giving away sweet potatoes because I harvested 77 pounds and there's no way I can eat that much before they would all go bad. And I'm going to be giving away rosemary, oregano, lemongrass, things like that. The lemongrass, it'd be nice to get it out before it potentially freezes, and the rosemary could definitely use a trim anyway, because look at that thing, it is insane. So I'll just be collecting some herbs throughout the video. Lemongrass will probably be next, but it's just to kind of help give them away, give a much needed trim. And I still use them, obviously. Whenever I'm cooking, I almost exclusively use fresh herbs, but it is nice to be able to give it away so that this thing doesn't take over my entire 6x4 bed that it lives in. Hello! We having a little staffy break? Yeah, you girl, you're very helpful. Very, very helpful. It's a sweet girl. Okay, bye. The next thing I'm going to do is going to set up both of these beds in a way that I haven't done in quite a while, but that's why I have these hoops installed, and that's going to be to cover them with frost cloth. Now there's mostly herbs in here that can tolerate a light freeze for sure, but I'm not the most certain about a moderate freeze. In fact, I really do think the lemongrass is going to take a hit, and possibly my artichokes back here, though if you've been following me for a while, you know my frustration with the artichokes. So I have my frost cloth, and basically I'm going to set it up either the back or the front. I haven't quite decided, so that all I have to do is roll it up over when the time comes, or I could just set it up now and leave a flap open. Maybe I'll do that. That actually sounds like a better idea. So it has been quite a while since I had these on. This might not be the right one. No, it is not. Okay. This one should be big enough for sure. Now I have these, and then I have basically just little office clips, and it's gonna be tough squeezing in my giant rosemary plant, but it should work out. Might take a couple clips. And since I'm only covering a couple of beds right now, I'm going to use as many clips as I want to secure them. Typically, I have to watch out, as I always run out of clips midway through covering all of my raised beds, but this isn't going to be anything like the 17-degree freeze we had a couple years ago, so I'm not the most worried. I put one down in the front to hold it in place for now, just so I know about how long I want it to be, and then I can just start using these clips and attaching it wherever I think it needs to be held down. I can already feel my rosemary bending a little bit, but it's just what's gonna have to be, because I'd rather a few broken rosemary branches than a bunch of dead plants, you know? And if there's any excess, I just like to typically fold it over or push it more toward the front, just in case I need extra room at any point for something. But it is more important, I think, to get the bottom attachment than this. This is gonna blow around in the wind anyway. It's what it's designed to do. So I do like to stabilize it there for now. But other than that, I wanna get all of these sides and try not to hurt my herbs as much as possible, but I feel like sometimes it just happens. And a few branches just might be sacrificed. The front, because I don't quite need it to be covered yet, I'm just gonna roll up this section and attach it to the front here. Get that over, there we go. And then I'll just use these clips when I need to cover it on Sunday. So this way most of my work is already done. It still has access to airflow. Light can come through here, so everything in here should be fine until the freeze, and hopefully obviously after. The cats love this, so they're probably going to be jumping in and playing in here for quite a while. I already saw them up the sides, but this is pretty much what it's gonna look like. So this is what the end result looks like for both. Obviously, I will cover up the front on Sunday, and I couldn't find the right one of these frost covers, so I used two smaller ones. They just clip together at the seam to ensure airflow doesn't get through. It's a little tight on this one. I do appreciate that, but I am losing daylight and I just couldn't find it. I have several bins of frost covers. This one was the right one. And of course, these are the plants that are probably going to be the most fine, so I should have switched this, but I think it'll be okay. It'll provide some additional protection. And then if I do get more worried, I am going to add blankets on top of these as well. These pipes can hold quite a bit of weight, so I will be doing something like that. I don't think I'm going to cover anything else in the garden. I just don't think it's going to need it. He's gonna go inside, obviously, because he's a little wimp about the cold. Saffron loves it, but not him. this I will cover. I guess that is the only other thing is the peas. But other than that, this is pretty much done. The last thing I had to do before the sun sets and before I get out of here is harvest some lemongrass. I didn't quite show that because it's pretty thick in here. It's like a jungle trying to get in and harvest it, but basically you just cut off the stalks. And I will show you how I process it because I am giving these away and this is just not ideal for any sort of storage. So what I like to do is just take each individual stalk. Here's a nice one. And I basically cut it off at the point where it stops being useful as lemongrass. So it is quite a bit longer than what you would see at a grocery store. So I'll just cut it off right there and you're left with this pretty nice stick. This one I had trouble getting out, so that's why it looks all wonky. But there are extra layers of paper, basically, if we think about it like garlic, that will come off of this. But this is what you'll be left with. This entire thing is usable in cooking, so it's pretty nice. It's much cheaper than buying your own lemongrass at the grocery store. Growing it is way better, and it's really easy. I think every year I pay $3, maybe $4 for a plant. And I think 2 or 3 stalks is $4 at the grocery store. So it does add up. Now here is an extra bit of paper. So that's sort of how it thickens up, is with the papers, and you can just take those off. So this is really nice presentation, really easy to store. They do last in the fridge for a little while, not forever. They do eventually dry up. There's another extra paper that came off. But I like to use them for various things, soups, making my own broth or stock. So this is a really nice thick one. And yeah, with all of the extra little papery bits, I'll just compost them. Everything has a purpose in the garden, obviously. So this is just an extra paper, yeah. So that is the last one. This is what you'll be left with, and then when you use these in recipes, you can just chop them up into smaller pieces and they're good to go. And here's what it looks like, all said and done. So that's it for these garden chores. I think we actually just got done before sunset, so perfect timing. I was able to harvest quite a bit of produce and some herbs, so that was really nice too, to have a final harvest of this garden before basically I have to start it over. And it's bittersweet, but it was bound to happen eventually. I don't live in a climate warm enough that I don't have to start some of these things over, and that's okay. One day I'd like to live in a place warm enough that I don't have to say goodbye to my peppers at least, or my lemongrass and things like that, but it's all right. I feel very grateful that we lasted this long before getting a freeze. I just don't enjoy it. I don't like cold weather. I am a warm weather girly. So for the most part, I do love living here in Texas, but these things are just bound to happen. Hopefully everything goes well. Hopefully it's not quite as cold. Like I said, I'm really aiming for it to stay at 29 at the lowest. I really would be happier if that was the case, but we'll just have to see. And you'll get some updates in the next garden tour as to how everything went and how the garden looks. There are lots of new seedlings cropping up every single day. Hopefully they'll make it through the freeze that's coming through, but I think they will, just because I'm only planting cold weather hardy crops right now. But that is it for us today. If you like this video, make sure to give Nutmeg and I here a thumbs up down below and subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here on the channel. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.